Welcome to HFY Stories. Please subscribe to the channel. Your one click means the world to me. The klaxons had been screaming for 6 minutes when Lieutenant Vexar watched Commander Thrick lower his weapon and let 400 pounds of muscle and teeth run straight at an unarmed human. Nobody breathed. The beast's paws hit the deck plating hard enough to rattle the viewport, and Vexar was already composing the words he'd use in his own report explaining how he'd watched their liaison officer die. That's where this story really starts. But to understand why a decorated commander stood down instead of firing, you have to go back to the moment the alarms first tore through Outpost Gamma 9. It began as noise without shape, something enormous moving fast through the lower corridors, and then Private Kelman's voice on the comm, thin and cracking, reporting 6 dead before anyone had confirmed what they were fighting. Vexar ran because everyone around him ran, 4 legs pounding the deck, his breathing apparatus shrieking with effort, and somewhere behind him something was gaining ground that no plasma bolt seemed able to slow. He caught one look at it over his shoulder, mottled fur, a jaw that could have closed around his torso, eyes that didn't track like a predator's should, too bright, too eager. It didn't move like anything in the tactical database. It moved like it was having fun. They made the blast door with less than a second to spare. Vexar went through in a dive that would have earned him a commendation on any other day, and the door sealed a heartbeat behind him, sealed, and then buckled inward under an impact that should have been impossible for anything without a warhead. The scratching started immediately, rhythmic, patient, and then it stopped being random and started sounding deliberate, claws testing the panel controls with something that was unmistakably intelligence. "It's working the lock," Kelman said, and nobody argued with him. Thrick pulled 12 names off the casualty report and read them like they weighed something physical. Whatever was on the other side of that door had gutted a 50-person garrison in under 10 minutes, and when he finally got the human liaison office on comm and demanded to know what in the void they were sheltering from, the answer came back so calmly it took a full 3 seconds to register. "It's a dog," the officer said. "German Shepherd, if that helps." Nobody in that corridor said anything for a long moment. Then Kelman, very quietly, "They keep those, on purpose." It got stranger. The dog's owner, Lieutenant Maya Vasquez, newly assigned, apparently unaware her companion animal had gotten loose, came over the comm, sounding less alarmed than embarrassed, and when Thrick told her flatly that her pet had a body count, her tone flipped from confusion to something sharper and more certain. "Where are you?" she said. "I'm coming to you." Thrick refused. She came anyway. That's the walk Vexar watched through the reinforced viewport, a human strolling down a corridor that had, 20 minutes earlier, been a slaughterhouse, wearing no armor, carrying no weapon, moving like she owned the place. And that's when the thing that had bent Durasteel came around the corner at a dead sprint, and Thrick raised a hand and told his soldiers to hold fire, because hitting her was the one outcome he refused to risk. She didn't run. She dropped to a knee, opened her arms, and let 400 pounds of muscle crash into her. It should have broken bones. Instead, she rode the impact backward half a step, arms locked around its neck, laughing while the creature's tail beat the air hard enough to raise dust, and its tongue scoured half her face in one pass. "There he is," she said, voice pitched entirely differently than the one she'd used on comm. "There's my terrible boy." Thrick stepped out from behind the door because someone had to get answers, and Vexar followed because someone had to keep the commander from becoming casualty 13. Up close, the animal was worse, a skull built entirely around teeth, eyes that tracked their approach with unnerving comprehension. It sat, unprompted, and offered a paw. "He wants to shake," Vasquez said. "It means he's decided he likes you." Thrick took the paw the way a man defuses something live. That should have been the end of the fear. It wasn't, not yet, because Thrick still had 12 names, and he hadn't asked the question that mattered. He asked it 3 weeks later, in a debrief neither of them had planned on. By then, the station had absorbed a parrot that could reproduce the emergency klaxon with terrifying accuracy, A 2-meter constrictor private Tors wore around his shoulders like jewelry, and an uneasy peace between Calarian nerves and Earth chaos. Thrick had been rereading the original incident report for the 4th time, and something in the casualty list finally snagged. "Lieutenant," he said, when Vasquez arrived for the follow-up review, "I need you to answer something honestly. Was anyone actually bitten? Anyone at all?" Vasquez went still. "Why?" "Because I've read 12 names every night for 3 weeks," Thrick said, "and I never once checked what killed them." The room went quiet enough that Vexar could hear the ventilation cycling. Vasquez set down her data pad. "Hilks discharged her weapon into a fuel coupling while running backward," she said slowly. "Vin was crushed under a container that came loose during the stampede. Genta went down a maintenance shaft because he wasn't looking where he put his feet." She looked up. "Commander, how many of your 12 did Max actually touch?" Thrick didn't answer right away. When he did, his voice had lost its usual formality. "2, he said. 2 confirmed, scratches, nothing fatal." Nobody in the room moved. Vexar felt something cold settle behind his ribs that had nothing to do with the animal at all. "You fired on a puppy having the best day of its life," Vasquez said, not unkindly. "And then 10 of your own people killed themselves running from the noise you made doing it." Thrick sat with that for a long moment, mandibles working without sound. "That report," he said finally, "is going to need to be rewritten. Entirely." "It usually does," Vasquez said, "the first time a species meets one of ours." He didn't argue. That was, Vexar thought later, the moment the fear actually left the station, not when Max sat and offered a paw, but when Thrick admitted out loud that the monster in his report had never been the one doing the killing. Months after that, Vexar stood at the observation deck viewport with a cup of the burnt-tasting human drink Vasquez had gotten half the crew addicted to, watching Max sleep in a patch of borrowed sunlight, paws twitching after something in a dream. "You looked at wolves," he said, "and decided you wanted that inside your walls. They hunted with us, guarded us. Somewhere along the way they stopped being useful and started being family," Vasquez said. "That part doesn't translate until you've lived it." Max's ear twitched at her voice, but he didn't wake. Vexar crouched, the way he'd have crouched to assess a threat, 3 months and 1 rewritten report ago, and rested a hand flat against the animal's ribs, feeling the slow rise and fall of the thing that had once made his hearts try to climb out of his throat. "Still terrifying," he said, mostly to himself. Max's tail thumped once against the deck plating, unbothered, entirely certain of its welcome, and somewhere down the corridor, a parrot began practicing the sound of an alarm nobody would panic at anymore.